My name is Lou, and I am 32 years old. I never thought my own parents would tell doctors to let me die after my car accident. I was barely conscious, but I heard every word as they called me a burden and walked away, leaving me to fight for my life alone. A week later, when they discovered my substantial inheritance from my grandfather, they suddenly reappeared with my brother, all smiles and fake concern. They had no idea what I had planned for them. If you are watching this, drop a comment telling me where you are from, hit like and subscribe to see what happens when someone who was left for dead decides to take back control. I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, in a sprawling colonial house that looked perfect from the outside. My father, Harold, was a third-generation investment banker who inherited both the family business and the family's cold demeanor. My mother, Martha, came from old money and cared more about social standing than actual human connections. Then there was my younger brother, Jake, the golden child who could do no wrong in their eyes. From my earliest memories, I knew I was different. While Jake was groomed to follow in our father's footsteps, I was more interested in computers and technology. Every achievement of mine was measured against what it could bring to the family name. My straight A's were expected, not celebrated. My coding competitions were dismissed as wasting time on toys. When I was 14, I built my first software program that helped local businesses track inventory. I was so proud when the local newspaper featured a small article about me. That evening at dinner, I slid the newspaper across the table to my parents. Mother barely glanced at it. Father frowned. "You could be using that brain for something useful, Lou. The Anderson boy is already interning at his father's firm," his father said, folding the newspaper without reading the article. Jake, who was 12 at the time, at least gave me a sympathetic look when our parents were not watching. But he never defended me. That was our family dynamic. Jake received the praise, I received the criticism, and we both stayed in our lanes. Despite their disapproval, I continued pursuing my passion for technology. I spent holidays and summers coding instead of networking at country club events. I started small businesses fixing computers for neighbors and building websites for local shops. I saved every penny, knowing I would need it to forge my own path. The real breaking point came when I received a full scholarship to MIT. Instead of being proud, my parents were furious. "This is ridiculous," Father shouted. "The Wilson name has been associated with Princeton for generations. Your grandfather sits on the board." "But MIT has the best computer science program," I argued. "Computer science," Mother scoffed. "You are throwing away your birthright for what? To be some glorified repairman." That night, I made my decision. I packed my belongings, took my savings, and left for MIT without saying goodbye. I left a note saying I would make my own way. Those years at MIT were transformative. I thrived in an environment where my skills were valued. I made real friends who appreciated me for who I was, not for my family name. I interned at major tech companies during summers and built a network of my own. After graduation, I joined a promising startup in Boston. Within 3 years, I had enough savings and experience to launch my own company developing security software. The business took off faster than I expected. By 30, I had built substantial wealth entirely on my own merit. During those years, contact with my family was minimal. Occasional stiff phone calls on holidays. A brief, uncomfortable visit when Jake graduated from Princeton. They never visited me, never asked about my company, never showed interest in my life. 5 years ago, I stopped trying. The last call was on Christmas, when my father spent 10 minutes talking about Jake making junior partner at the family firm before asking if I was still playing with computers. I hung up and blocked their numbers. My real breakthrough, both professionally and personally, came when I met Samantha at a tech conference in San Francisco. She was brilliant, compassionate, and understood what it was like to forge your own path. Her parents had wanted her to become a doctor, but she had pursued her passion for artificial intelligence instead. With Sam, I learned what real support felt like. She celebrated my victories, helped me through setbacks, and never made me feel like I was not enough. Through her, I also built a circle of genuine friends. Tyler, my business partner, became like a brother to me. Rachel and her husband David became our weekend hiking companions and dinner party regulars. For the first time, I understood what family could and should be. I was healing from my childhood wounds and building a life filled with purpose and genuine connections. My company continued to grow. I made smart investments in real estate and emerging technologies. My net worth quietly grew to several $1 million, though I lived relatively modestly in a comfortable condo in Boston. I donated to educational programs, teaching coding to underprivileged kids. I was making a difference on my own terms. The only remaining connection to my biological family was my grandfather, my father's father. Unlike his son, Grandpa George had always shown interest in my technology ventures. He would call occasionally, and we would talk about innovation and the future. He never pressured me to return to the family fold. He seemed to understand my need for independence. I was in a good place. I had success on my own terms, a loving relationship, real friendships, and the freedom to chart my own course. I had no idea how quickly it could all come crashing down, or how the family I had worked so hard to escape would re-enter my life in the most devastating way possible. It happened on a rainy Tuesday evening in October. I was driving back from a late meeting with potential investors. The streets were slick with rain, visibility was poor, and I was admittedly tired after a 12-hour workday. I remember checking my phone for a text from Sam about dinner plans. Just a glance. That was all it took. I did not see the truck that had run a red light until it was too late. The collision was catastrophic. The impact came from the driver's side, crushing the door inward. The airbag deployed, but the force was tremendous. Metal twisted, glass shattered. My car spun across the intersection before slamming into a light pole. My memories of the immediate aftermath are fragmented. Blaring horns, flashing lights, the taste of blood, someone shouting for an ambulance, the sensation of being lifted, carried, moved. Then darkness. I woke up in intensive care. My body was a constellation of pain. Breathing hurt. Moving was impossible. Opening my eyes required tremendous effort. A doctor's face swam into view. Serious expression. Clipboard in hand. "Mr. Wilson, you have been in a severe accident," he explained in a measured tone. "You have multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and a traumatic brain injury. We have you stabilized, but you will need several surgeries." I tried to speak, but there was a tube in my throat. Panic rose within me. "Try not to move," the doctor continued. "You are on a ventilator to help you breathe. We have contacted your emergency contacts. Your parents are on their way." My parents? In my pain-fogged state, I could not understand why they would call them. Sam was my emergency contact. Then I remembered I had never updated my emergency information after college. My parents were still listed. The next few hours were a blur of tests, medications, and drifting in and out of consciousness. I remember catching fragments of medical jargon. Critical condition. Uncertain prognosis. Extensive rehabilitation needed. Cost of care. Then, through the haze of painkillers and semi-consciousness, I heard familiar voices. My parents had arrived. For a brief, foolish moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps in this moment of crisis, they would finally show the concern and care I had always craved. I kept my eyes closed, unable to face them yet, still struggling with the pain and medication. But I could hear everything. "Doctor, what exactly is his condition?" My father's authoritative voice demanded. The doctor explained the extent of my injuries in clinical detail. Multiple surgeries would be needed. Months of physical therapy. The potential for lasting disabilities. "And the costs?" my mother asked. "No, how is he, or will he be okay?" "Just costs." There was a pause as the doctor seemed taken aback by the question. Mrs. Wilson, your son has excellent insurance through his company, but there will likely be substantial out-of-pocket expenses for the extended care he will need. We can have our financial department discuss options. My father cleared his throat. To be frank, doctor, we have not been in contact with Lou for some time. His lifestyle choices and career path were not in line with family expectations. I could almost picture the doctor's confusion. I see, the doctor said carefully. But he is your son, and he is in critical condition. Yes, well, my mother said with the same tone she used when discussing unfortunate charity cases at her social clubs. Lou has always been difficult, always going against the family. Such a disappointment compared to his brother. The doctor's voice became colder. Mrs. Wilson, your son may need family support for his recovery. The psychological component of healing is just as important as the physical. Then my father said the words that would forever change our relationship. Doctor, to be perfectly honest, we are not prepared to shoulder any financial or caretaking burden for Lou. He made his choice to leave the family years ago. He has been nothing but a burden and disappointment. If his condition is as serious as you say, perhaps it would be best to just let him go. My mother added, we have another son who actually values family. We need to focus our resources there. Lou chose his path. I felt like I was being crushed all over again, not by metal and glass this time, but by the finality of their rejection. My own parents were suggesting the doctors not fight too hard to save me. That I was not worth saving. I must have made a sound, some involuntary reaction to their cruelty, because the room suddenly went quiet. Is he awake? My mother asked, her voice suddenly uncertain. The doctor moved to my side. I felt him checking my vitals. He appears to still be unconscious, but I should remind you that hearing is often the last sense to go. He may be able to hear you. I kept my eyes firmly shut, not wanting them to see I was conscious, not wanting to give them the satisfaction of knowing I had heard every word of their betrayal. Well, my father said after an uncomfortable pause, we have said all we need to say. Please have your financial department contact us about any paperwork needed to formally absolve us of responsibility. Their footsteps retreated. They left without touching me, without a goodbye, without a single word of comfort or concern. They left me to die. After they were gone, I opened my eyes to find the doctor looking at me with unmistakable sympathy. You heard them, he said. It was not a question. I managed a small nod, the movement sending fresh pain through my damaged body. I am so sorry, he said, genuine compassion in his voice. But I want you to know that we are going to do everything we can for you, regardless of your family's position. A nurse named Maria came in shortly after. She had been in the room during my parents' visit and had witnessed everything. She adjusted my IV and gently touched my hand. Some people do not deserve to be parents, she said quietly. But you deserve to live, Mr. Wilson. And we are going to help you fight. In that sterile hospital room, abandoned by those who should have loved me most, strangers showed me more compassion than my family ever had. It was both devastating and clarifying. Any illusion that my parents might someday accept me was shattered. But in that shattering came a strange sort of freedom. The days after my parents' visit were the darkest of my life. Physical pain competed with emotional devastation. Each breath hurt. Each thought stung. But somewhere beneath the morphine haze and crushing betrayal, a spark of defiance ignited. They wanted me to die. Therefore, I had to live. Nurse Maria became my unexpected ally. She went above and beyond her professional duties, advocating for me with specialists and making sure I received every possible care. She helped me navigate the hospital's financial assistance programs and connected me with a social worker who specialized in cases like mine. I would not die. I would not give my parents the satisfaction. The first real ray of hope came when Sam finally found out about my accident. The hospital had been unable to reach her because her number was not in my emergency contacts. It was Tyler who eventually tracked her down when I missed an important meeting. I will never forget the moment she burst into my hospital room, her face pale with fear and worry. "Lou." "Oh my God," she gasped, carefully taking my hand between hers. "Why did no one call me? What happened?" "The nurse said you have been here for 3 days." I could not speak yet due to the ventilator, but I squeezed her hand weakly. Tears streamed down my face, tears of relief at seeing someone who actually cared whether I lived or died. Sam immediately took charge. She contacted Tyler and my other friends. Within 24 hours, I had a rotation of visitors, each bringing determination and support. Sam temporarily moved into a hotel near the hospital to be with me every day. When I was finally able to communicate, first by writing and then, after the ventilator was removed, by speaking, I told Sam what my parents had said and done. Her face transformed with a fury I had never seen before. "Those monsters," she whispered. "How could they?" "To their own son." "It is who they have always been," I rasped through my damaged throat. I just never knew how deep it went. The road to recovery was brutal. 3 major surgeries to repair internal injuries and set broken bones. Infections that set my progress back weeks. Physical therapy sessions that left me drenched in sweat and tears. Nightmares where I heard my parents' voices, telling doctors to let me die over and over again. But I was not alone. Sam was there through it all, sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair, advocating with doctors, researching treatments, and simply holding my hand when the pain became too much. Tyler took over the day-to-day operations of our company, keeping everything running smoothly and bringing me updates to keep my mind engaged. Rachel organized a meal train so that Sam would have home-cooked food every day. David used his connections as a physical therapist to get me appointments with the best specialists in Boston. 6 weeks into my hospital stay, during a particularly grueling physical therapy session, I received unexpected news. The hospital administrator visited me personally. "Mr. Wilson, I wanted to inform you that we received a call from the executor of your grandfather's estate," she said. "It seems your grandfather, George Wilson, passed away last week." I felt a pang of genuine grief. Grandpa George had been my only real family connection in recent years. "I am sorry to hear that," I said, my voice still raspy from the ventilator damage. "There is more," she continued. "The executor informed us that you are a primary beneficiary of your grandfather's estate. A substantial portion of his assets have been left to you directly, including his personal investment portfolio and his house in Cape Cod." I was stunned. Grandpa George and I had maintained a relationship, but I had no idea he intended to leave me anything. The administrator looked genuinely pleased. "According to the executor, the inheritance is significant. Several $1 million at minimum. They will be in touch with more details, but they wanted the hospital to know that all your medical expenses will be covered in full." This changed everything. Not just financially, though the security was welcome. What struck me most was that my grandfather had believed in me when my parents had not. He had valued our connection enough to make me a primary heir. That night I shared the news with Sam. "This is incredible, Lou," she said. "Your grandfather must have really loved you." "He was the only one who ever respected my choices," I said. "He used to call me every few months just to hear about my latest projects. He never pressured me to come back to the family business." A thought occurred to me then, one that made me sit up despite the pain. "Sam, if I inherited part of Grandpa's estate, I wonder who got the rest." Sam's eyes widened as she realized what I was thinking. "Your parents," she said. "They must have inherited too. And if they did, and they found out about my portion, they would suddenly be very interested in their previously disposable son," Sam finished, her expression darkening. I nodded, a cold certainty settling in my chest. "They will come back," I said. "Not because they care if I live or die, but because they care about what they think should be theirs." Sam squeezed my hand. "Then we need to be ready for them." That night marked a turning point in my recovery. Anger and anticipation became powerful motivators. Each painful step in physical therapy, each small victory in regaining my independence, was fueled by determination to be strong enough to face my parents when they inevitably reappeared. I had a new purpose now, not just to survive, but to thrive. Not just to recover, but to be ready. Because I knew with absolute certainty that the same parents who had walked away, leaving me to die, would return with their hands outstretched, expecting to benefit from my good fortune. And when they did, I would be waiting. It took exactly 8 days after the executor contacted the hospital. 8 days for news of my inheritance to travel through family channels. 8 days for greed to overcome their previous decision to abandon me. 8 days from when they learned about the money until they appeared in my hospital room as if the previous visit had never happened. I was in a private room by then, moved from intensive care as my condition stabilized. I had just finished a grueling physical therapy session and was resting when the door opened without a knock. And there they were, my parents, looking exactly as they always had. Father in his bespoke suit, mother in her designer dress, both wearing expressions of practiced concern that did not reach their eyes. And behind them, looking uncomfortable and uncertain, was Jake. "Lou, honey," my mother exclaimed, rushing forward as if to embrace me, then stopping short when she saw the extent of my injuries. "My sweet boy, we came as soon as we heard you were well enough for visitors." I looked at her expressionless, saying nothing. My father stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Son, we have been so worried. The doctors told us it was touch and go for a while, but we never lost faith." Never lost faith. The audacity of that lie sent a surge of anger through me, but I kept my face carefully neutral. I had been preparing for this moment. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Jake shifted his weight from one foot to another, not meeting my eyes. "Did you bring me anything?" I finally asked, my voice deliberately weak. My mother blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, we thought our presence would be the best medicine," my father interjected smoothly. I noticed none of them had actually asked how I was doing or about my prognosis. "It has been a difficult time," I said, watching their reactions carefully. "The doctors say my recovery will be lengthy and expensive." At the word expensive, both my parents leaned forward slightly. Mother reached out to pat my hand, her diamond rings catching the fluorescent light. "Money is no object for family," she said. "In fact, we have been discussing having you move back home during your recovery." "Home to Connecticut?" I asked, feigning confusion. "Of course," Father said. "Where else? The house is plenty big, and your room is just as you left it. We can hire the best private nurses and therapists. You need your family at a time like this." I had never needed them less. Jake finally stepped forward, looking genuinely distressed. "Hey, Lou. You look. I am glad you are alive, man." Of all of them, Jake seemed sincere. I nodded at him, the barest acknowledgement. "Actually, I already have care arranged," I said. "My girlfriend, Samantha, has been here since the accident." Mother's lips tightened at the mention of Sam. "The girlfriend we have never met. Surely a professional caregiver would be better. Besides, she must have her own life, job, commitments. You would not want to burden her." The word burden sent a chill through me. The exact word they had used when telling the doctor to let me die. "Sam does not consider me a burden," I said, looking directly at my mother. An uncomfortable silence fell. Father cleared his throat again. "Actually, Lou, there is another matter we should discuss. Your grandfather's passing." Ah, there it was. The real reason for their visit. "Yes, I heard," I said. "It is a shame I could not attend the funeral." Father nodded solemnly. "He was a great man. Left quite a legacy." I waited, forcing them to be the ones to bring up the inheritance directly. Mother took the bait. "We were surprised to learn that he left you such a significant portion of his estate. Especially since you have been so removed from family affairs." "I imagine that was disappointing for you," I said mildly. Father's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice remained even. Not at all. Family wealth is family wealth. However, in your condition, managing such assets would be an unnecessary stress. And that is why we are here, Mother added. To help you. To help me manage my inheritance, I clarified. Father spread his hands in a gesture of generosity. It makes sense, son. I have been managing the family investments for decades. Why not let me handle this burden while you focus on getting better? Another use of burden. They really could not help themselves. That is very thoughtful, I said, allowing a touch of gratitude to enter my voice. I will certainly consider it. Their postures relaxed slightly, sensing victory. We could start right away, Father pressed. I could have the executor transfer everything to the family office accounts. Simplify everything. I noticed Jake shifting uncomfortably again. He had been silent throughout this part of the conversation, staring out the window as if trying to distance himself. Actually, before we discuss that further, could I have a moment alone with Jake? I asked, brother to brother. It has been so long. My parents exchanged a quick glance. Mother opened her mouth as if to object, but Father touched her arm lightly. Of course, he said. We will go find the doctor and discuss your treatment plan. When they left, Jake visibly relaxed. He pulled up a chair and sat beside my bed. Jesus, Lou, he said, running a hand through his hair. This is all so messed up. How much do you know? I asked directly. He looked confused. About what? Grandpa's will. About what they said to my doctor when they first came. About telling them to let me die. Jake's face drained of color. What are you talking about? So he did not know. Interesting. The first time they came to the hospital, I told him, they told my doctor I was a burden and a disappointment, and that they would not pay for my care. They suggested it might be better to just let me die. Then they left without saying goodbye. Jake looked physically ill. That cannot be true. They would not. They could not. I was conscious, Jake. I heard every word. He put his head in his hands. God, Lou, I had no idea. They told me they came to see you, but you were unconscious, and the doctors said it was too early for visitors to do any good. A convenient lie. And now they want to help manage my inheritance, I said. Interesting timing. Jake looked up, his expression troubled. Things are not good, Lou. The family business has been struggling. Dad made some bad investments. They have been liquidating assets. I had suspected as much. And now Grandpa's money looks like a solution to their problems. Lou, Jake said hesitantly, I did not know about what they did. You have to believe me. I would never have gone along with that. I studied my brother's face. Despite everything, I believed him. Jake had been complicit in many ways over the years, accepting his favored status, never standing up to our parents on my behalf. But this level of callousness seemed to genuinely shock him. I believe you, I said finally. But now you know who they really are. Jake nodded slowly. So what are you going to do? I am going to get better, I said simply. And I am going to protect what is mine. The question is, Jake, what are you going to do now that you know the truth? Before he could answer, the door opened and our parents returned, accompanied by my doctor. The rest of their visit was a blur of fake concern and thinly veiled attempts to discuss my financial affairs. I played along, appearing weaker and more confused than I actually was, watching as they became increasingly confident in their ability to manipulate me. When they finally left, promising to return the next day, Sam came in from the cafeteria where she had been waiting. She found me staring out the window, my jaw clenched in anger. How bad was it? She asked, taking my hand. Exactly as we expected, I replied. They want me to move back to Connecticut, where they can control everything. They want access to the inheritance. They are barely even pretending to care about my health. Sam's expression hardened. Those vultures. After what they did. But I have learned something valuable, I continued. The family business is failing. They are desperate. And most importantly, Jake had no idea what they said the first time. He was genuinely horrified. "Do you trust him?" Sam asked. I considered this carefully. Not completely, but enough to know he might be a wild card in all this. And they have been lying to him, too. I squeezed Sam's hand, feeling more determined than ever. They think I am weak and desperate for their approval. They think they can manipulate me like they always have. But they have no idea who I have become. "What are you planning?" Sam asked. I smiled for the first time since they had arrived. Something they will never see coming. The next morning I made 2 important phone calls. The first was to Diana Winters, a brilliant attorney who had helped with legal matters for my tech company. The second was to a private investigator recommended by Diana. Both agreed to meet me at the hospital that afternoon. Diana arrived first, elegant and sharp as always, carrying her leather portfolio. "Lou," she said, surveying my injuries with concern. "You look like you have been through hell." And back I replied with a grim smile. "Thank you for coming on short notice." Sam and I quickly filled her in on everything, from my parents' first visit to their sudden reappearance after learning about the inheritance. Diana took notes, her expression growing increasingly outraged. When we finished, she set down her pen and took a deep breath. "What your parents did is unconscionable," she said, "both morally and potentially legally. Abandoning you in a medical crisis, then returning only when money is involved, suggests a clear pattern of elder abuse given your vulnerable state. Can they challenge Grandpa's will?" I asked, getting to my point of greatest concern. Diana shook her head. "I would need to review the specific language, but if your grandfather was of sound mind and the will was properly executed, it would be very difficult to contest. However," she added, "they do not need to challenge the will if they can convince you to sign over control of your assets voluntarily." "And that is exactly what they are trying to do," Sam said. The private investigator, Michael Reeves, arrived shortly after. He was not what I expected, a small, unassuming man who looked more like an accountant than a detective. But Diana had assured me he was the best at financial investigations. "I want to know everything," I told him. "The real state of the family business, their personal finances, any debts, any skeletons, any potential legal vulnerabilities. Especially anything related to my grandfather's estate or business dealings." Michael nodded, making brief notes. "Timeline? As soon as possible. My parents are moving quickly. They want me to sign papers giving them power of attorney, claiming it is for my own good while I recover. I will start right away," he promised. Initial findings within 48 hours. After they left, I discussed strategy with Sam. The first priority was to delay my parents without arousing their suspicion. To buy time while we gathered information and prepared. My parents returned that evening as promised, this time bearing flowers and a basket of expensive toiletries, as if such tokens could erase their earlier betrayal. They were all solicitude and concern in front of the nurses, but as soon as we were alone, the conversation turned to business matters. "I have spoken with the executor," Father said. "He is prepared to release your portion of the estate as soon as you sign these authorization forms." He produced a folder of documents. "I have had my legal team prepare a temporary power of attorney," he continued, "so I can manage these affairs while you recover." "Just a precaution, of course." "Of course," I echoed, taking the folder with a shaking hand, deliberately playing up my weakness. "This all seems so complicated. I am still on so many medications, it is hard to think clearly." "That is why you need our help, son," Father said, his tone patronizing. "You are in no condition to handle complex financial matters." Mother sat on the edge of my bed, patting my arm. "We only want what is best for you, dear. Family takes care of family." The audacity of that statement after what they had done nearly broke my composure, but I maintained my facade of gratitude and confusion. "Could I have a few days to look these over?" I asked. "Maybe discuss them with my doctors." Father frowned slightly. Time is of the essence with investments, Lou. Markets wait for no man. I coughed weakly, wincing at the genuine pain the movement caused. I am sorry, I just need a little time. My head is not clear yet. Mother shot father a warning look. Of course you can have some time, dear. We do not want to pressure you while you are recovering. But not too long, father added. These opportunities will not wait indefinitely. After they left, I immediately texted Diana the contents of the folder they had given me. Her response came within the hour. Do not sign anything. These documents give them complete control, not just temporary power of attorney. They could liquidate everything. The next few days fell into a pattern. My parents visited daily, each time pressing a little harder about the paperwork. I continued to delay, claiming medication fog and doctors' advice to avoid stress. Meanwhile, Michael's investigation began producing results. He discovered that the family investment firm had lost several major clients in the past year. There were rumors of mismanagement and excessive risk. They had taken out significant loans against family properties. They were selling assets quietly but steadily. Most interesting was what he found regarding my grandfather. Apparently, in the last years of his life, Grandpa George had become increasingly concerned about how the family business was being run. He had quietly moved substantial portions of his personal wealth out of the family firm's control. His will reflected this concern, placing much of his estate into trusts with specific conditions, rather than giving it outright to my father. By the end of the week, Michael had uncovered something truly damning. Evidence suggested that my father had been misappropriating funds from my grandfather's accounts, while acting as his financial advisor. Not enough to raise immediate red flags, but substantial sums over time. When Jake visited me alone 3 days after their initial return, I decided to test his loyalties. The family business is in trouble, is not it? I asked directly. Jake looked startled, then resigned. How did you know? It is obvious from how desperate they are to get control of my inheritance, I said. Jake sank into the visitor chair, suddenly looking exhausted. It is bad, Lou. Really bad. Dad made some risky investments that went south. Several clients pulled out when they found out. There are rumors the SEC is looking into some transactions. Has Dad been taking money from Grandpa's accounts? I asked, watching his reaction closely. Jake's face told me everything I needed to know. You know about that? He whispered. I know more than they think, I said. The question is, Jake, where do you stand in all this? Jake looked genuinely tormented. They are our parents, Lou. But what they did to you, I cannot defend that. And some of Dad's business practices lately. He closed his eyes. I have been looking the other way too long. It was the first honest conversation we had had in years. I am not asking you to betray them, I said carefully. But I am asking you to stop helping them betray me. Jake nodded slowly. Fair enough. What do you want to know? Everything, I said. And so Jake became my inside source, confirming what Michael discovered and adding crucial details. How our father had been falsifying reports to the board. How our mother had been selling family heirlooms to maintain appearances. How they had discussed strategies to get control of my inheritance, including suggesting I was not mentally competent to manage it after my brain injury. Diana used this information to help me develop a comprehensive plan. Not just to protect my inheritance, but to ensure my parents could never threaten me again. 2 weeks after their reappearance, when I was finally scheduled for discharge from the hospital, I made my move. Actually, I told my parents during their visit, I have been thinking about your offer. You are right, I am in no condition to manage these affairs myself right now. The triumph in their eyes was barely disguised. That is very sensible, Lou, father said. I can have the papers ready for your signature tomorrow. I think I would like to sign them before I leave the hospital, I said. Get everything settled. Excellent, mother said. We will make all the arrangements for your homecoming. I smiled weakly. Actually, I was thinking I might recuperate at Grandpa's Cape Cod house. The sea air might be good for my recovery. Father frowned. But we have everything prepared at home. The Cape house is part of my inheritance, right? I asked innocently. It would be nice to feel close to Grandpa. After a moment's hesitation, Father nodded. Of course. Whatever you think best. As they left to call their lawyer, I texted Diana. They took the bait. Prepare everything. The next day, my parents arrived with their lawyer and the power of attorney documents. I signed where indicated, my hand genuinely shaky from my injuries, but my mind perfectly clear about what I was doing. Father could barely contain his satisfaction as he tucked the signed papers into his briefcase. You have made the right decision, Lou, he said. Now you can focus entirely on getting better and leave the financial matters to me. Little did he know that what he held was not what he thought. Diana had prepared doctored documents that appeared identical but contained crucial differences, including a 48-hour revocation clause and limits on what actions could be taken. The real papers, giving Diana temporary authority to protect my assets, had been signed and notarized that morning. By the time my parents discovered the switch, it would be too late. The trap was set, and they had walked right into it. 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. My parents had arranged for an ambulance to transport me to the Cape Cod house, insisting it was necessary given my condition. In reality, I was recovering well enough to have traveled by car with Sam, but I allowed them this show of concern. It served my purposes to appear more fragile than I actually was. The Cape House was exactly as I remembered from childhood summers, a sprawling shingled structure overlooking the Atlantic. As the ambulance attendant settled me into the master bedroom, I caught my mother eyeing Grandpa's antique furniture and artwork with a calculating gaze. We will stay for a few days to help you settle in, she announced. Jake will join us tomorrow. Perfect, I thought, though I merely nodded gratefully. Sam arrived an hour later with my personal items and medications. I could see my mother bristle at her presence, but there was little she could do about it without revealing her true feelings. That evening, as I rested in the bedroom, I overheard my parents in the study across the hall, their voices carrying through the old house's thin walls. The transfer should be complete by tomorrow, Father was saying. Henderson confirmed the papers are being processed. And he suspects nothing. Mother asked. Father chuckled. Lou has always been naive about business matters. By the time he realizes what has happened, everything will be safely under our control. I smiled to myself, thinking of the surprise that awaited them. Diana had already executed my countermeasures. Every cent of my inheritance had been legally secured through a series of irrevocable trusts. The family business shares Grandpa had left me had been sold to their biggest competitor. The Cape House had been transferred to a separate LLC under my control. Jake arrived the next morning, giving me a meaningful look when we were momentarily alone. Everything is in place, he whispered. By mid-afternoon, both Diana and Michael had arrived, introduced to my parents simply as my financial advisor and security consultant. My parents were visibly annoyed at these additions, but maintained their solicitous facade. I had arranged for dinner to be catered that evening, claiming it was a small celebration of my recovery and a memorial for Grandpa. My parents, always conscious of appearances, invited a few of their remaining social connections who summered nearby. Perfect witnesses for what was to come. As we gathered in the dining room, I remained in my wheelchair, still playing the role of invalid. My father stood to offer a toast. To family, he said, raising his glass. And to Lou's continued recovery. The Wilson name endures. The guests murmured their approval. Sam squeezed my hand under the table. Thank you, Father, I said when he finished. I would like to say a few words as well, if I may. Of course, son, he said magnanimously. I looked around the table at the assembled guests, at Jake's tense expression, at my parents' smug faces. First, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, especially those of you who reached out during my hospital stay. Your support meant everything during that difficult time. My parents smiled, though neither of them had sent so much as a text until they learned about the inheritance. I continued, many of you know that my relationship with my parents has been distant in recent years. What you may not know is why I am really thanking you all for being here tonight. My father's smile faltered slightly. You are witnesses, I said, my voice strengthening. 3 weeks ago, I was in a catastrophic car accident. I suffered multiple injuries and was in critical condition. The hospital called my emergency contacts, my parents. Mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. When they arrived, I continued, they spoke with my doctor. They thought I was unconscious, but I heard everything. Would you like to know what they said? Lou, father interrupted, this is hardly dinner conversation. They told my doctor that I was a disappointment and a burden. I pressed on. They said it would be better to let me die than to waste resources on my care. Then they left me there without a goodbye, without a backward glance. Gasps rippled around the table. Mother's face had gone white. Father's had turned an alarming shade of red. Fortunately, I survived despite their abandonment, I said. And then a miracle occurred. They discovered I had inherited a substantial portion of Grandpa's estate. Suddenly, I was worth visiting again. Lou, that is quite enough, Father said sharply. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Actually, I am just getting started. I pressed play on the recording Michael had helped me obtain from the hospital security system. My parents' voices filled the room, crystal clear, telling the doctor I was a burden, suggesting it would be better to let me die. The faces of the dinner guests registered shock, then disgust. My mother began to cry, but I could see it was from humiliation, not remorse. When the recording ended, I continued, what you just heard was recorded 3 weeks ago. What you do not know is that I have been recording everything since then as well. I played another clip, this one from the Cape House study just the previous evening, of my parents discussing how they plan to take control of my inheritance without my knowledge. As the second recording finished, Father stood up, his face contorted with rage. This is outrageous. You have been spying on us, recording private conversations. That is illegal. Diana spoke up coolly from her seat. Actually, Mr. Wilson, Massachusetts is a one-party consent state for recordings. As long as Lou was a party to the conversation, or the conversations occurred in a place with no reasonable expectation of privacy, such as a hospital room or a common area of this house, the recordings are perfectly legal. Father turned to the dinner guests. This is a private family matter. I must ask you all to leave. None of them moved, too captivated by the unfolding drama. Before anyone goes anywhere, I said, there are a few more things you should know. While you thought I was signing over control of my inheritance to you, I was actually securing it beyond your reach. The family business shares Grandpa left me have been sold to Westbrook Partners. Father gasped audibly. Westbrook was their biggest competitor. The Cape House has been transferred to a trust, I continued. And I have instructed Diana to forward evidence of financial irregularities in Grandpa's accounts to the proper authorities for investigation. This is how you repay us. Mother finally spoke, her voice trembling with indignation. After everything we have done for you. Like what? I asked calmly. Telling doctors to let me die. Coming back only when you thought there was money to be gained. Lying to everyone, including yourselves, about who you really are. I turned to Jake, who had been watching silently. Jake was not part of their original betrayal, I said to the room. He did not know what they had done until I told him. And when he found out, he made a choice to stand on the side of truth. Jake stood up slowly. I have spent my entire life trying to be the son you wanted, he said to our parents. But I cannot condone what you did to Lou. What you tried to do with Grandpa's money. It ends here. Father looked from Jake to me, his world crumbling around him. This is not over, he said in a low, dangerous voice. You will regret this, both of you. Actually, it is over, I replied. The documents you thought gave you power of attorney have a 48-hour revocation clause, which I exercised yesterday. You have no legal claim to anything of mine. Additionally, I have submitted formal complaints to the Securities and Exchange Commission regarding potentially fraudulent activities at the family firm. The dinner guests began to rise, murmuring excuses, eager to escape but even more eager to spread the shocking news throughout their social circle. As they filed out, I addressed my parents one last time. I do not want your money. I do not want your name. I do not want anything from you ever again. You are not my family. You forfeited that right when you left me to die. Father stormed out, slamming the front door so hard that the windows rattled. Mother lingered, suddenly looking old and defeated. You will never understand what it means to be a Wilson, she said. Thank God for that, I replied. After she left, the house fell silent except for the distant sound of waves crashing on the shore. Sam came to stand beside my wheelchair, her hand on my shoulder. Are you okay? She asked softly. I took a deep breath, feeling an enormous weight lift from my chest. For the first time in my life, I replied, I think I really am. The months that followed were both challenging and liberating. My physical recovery continued to be difficult, with setbacks and victories, pain and progress. 3 more surgeries to repair damage to my spine. Countless physical therapy sessions. Days when getting out of bed seemed impossible. But unlike my time in the hospital, this recovery period was marked by a profound sense of peace. The Cape House became a sanctuary, its rhythms dictated by the tides rather than family expectations. Sam worked remotely to stay with me, setting up her laptop in the sunroom overlooking the ocean. Friends visited regularly, bringing laughter and normalcy. The legal fallout from my confrontation with my parents was significant but manageable. Diana handled everything with ruthless efficiency. As predicted, my father attempted to challenge my mental competency, claiming my brain injury had rendered me unable to make sound decisions. The attempt failed spectacularly when my doctors testified to my cognitive function, and the recordings revealed his true motives. The SEC investigation into the family firm gained momentum when several former employees came forward with additional evidence of financial improprieties. My father was forced to step down as CEO pending the investigation. The family name that had meant everything to my parents was now tarnished in the very circles they had worked so hard to impress. I took no pleasure in their downfall. What I felt instead was a profound sense of closure. The family dynamics that had shaped and scarred me for decades had finally been exposed for what they were. I was free of them at last. As my strength returned, I began to think about what came next. The inheritance from Grandpa gave me financial freedom, but money had never been my primary motivation. What I wanted was purpose, connection, meaning. One morning, about 6 months after leaving the hospital, I sat with Sam on the deck, watching the sunrise over the Atlantic. I have been thinking, I said, about starting a foundation. What kind of foundation? She asked. For accident victims without support systems, I explained. People who do not have anyone to advocate for them. People the system might otherwise discard. The Maria Foundation, Sam suggested with a smile, referencing the nurse who had been my first ally. I liked that. Maria had shown me that sometimes kindness from strangers can save lives. I wanted to multiply that kindness. With Sam's help and Diana's legal expertise, the Maria Foundation took shape. We established a fund for medical expenses not covered by insurance. We created an advocacy program to help patients navigate the healthcare system. We built a network of volunteer companions for those facing recovery alone. The work was healing for me in ways no physical therapy could match. Each person we helped was a reminder that something good had come from my darkest moments. The foundation quickly became my primary focus, even as I maintained involvement with my tech company. 6 months after launching the foundation, I received an unexpected email from Jake. We had spoken only occasionally since the confrontation, both of us needing space to redefine our relationship. Can we meet? His message simply asked. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Boston halfway between his apartment and mine. I had moved back to the city by then, though I kept the Cape House for weekends and retreats. Jake looked different when he walked in, less polished, more authentic. He had let his hair grow longer and traded his customary suit for jeans and a casual shirt. Thanks for meeting me, he said as we sat down with our coffees. How are you? I asked, genuinely interested. Better than I expected, he admitted. I left the family firm, you know. Started over with a small investment group focused on sustainable businesses. I had not known that. I'm glad to hear it, I said sincerely. Jake stared into his coffee. I have been doing a lot of thinking about our family. About who I want to be versus who they raised me to be. That makes two of us. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I want to apologize, Lou. Not just for what they did, but for my part in it all. For all the years I accepted the favoritism. For never standing up for you. For being complicit in a system that hurt you. His sincerity was palpable, and I felt something shift between us. I accept your apology, I said. And I want you to know, I do not blame you for the choices they made. We were both children shaped by their values. The difference is that now we get to choose our own. Jake nodded, visibly relieved. I would like to be a part of your life, he said. If you want that. As brothers for real this time. I found that I did want that. Not the fake family dynamics of our childhood, but something new and genuine. I would like that too, I told him. Our conversation flowed more easily after that, catching up on our lives, sharing stories without the weight of family expectations. Before he left, Jake mentioned one more thing. They asked about you, he said quietly. Mom and Dad. What did you tell them? The truth. That you are thriving without them. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at my office. I recognized my mother's handwriting on the envelope immediately. I set it aside for several days, unsure whether I wanted to open it. Finally, curiosity won out. The letter was long, rambling in parts, surprisingly vulnerable in others. My mother wrote about the shame she felt when the recordings were played. About facing social ostracism for the first time in her life. About Dad's legal troubles and their financial difficulties. But mostly, she wrote about regret. We were wrong, Lou. Terribly, unforgivably wrong. What we said in that hospital room was monstrous. What we tried to do afterward was inexcusable. I do not expect your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I understand now what we did. The letter continued with memories of my childhood, moments she now recognized as missed opportunities for connection. It ended with a request to meet, just once so she could apologize in person. I discussed it with Sam and with my therapist, Dr. Levine, whom I had been seeing since leaving the hospital. Both encouraged me to make the decision based on what would bring me peace, not what I thought I should do. After much reflection, I wrote back a brief response. I acknowledge your apology. I am not ready to meet. Perhaps someday, but not now. I wish you healing on your own journey. It was not forgiveness exactly, but it was a step away from anger. And that was enough for now. As the 1-year anniversary of my accident approached, Sam and I decided to host a gathering at the Cape House for everyone who had helped me through the darkest period of my life. Maria flew in from Boston. Tyler and his new fiancée drove up from New York. Rachel and David brought their newborn daughter. Jake came alone but seemed at peace with that. Diana made an appearance, refusing to talk about work for once. We stood together on the beach at sunset, the October air crisp but not yet cold. I looked at these people who had become my true family, bound not by blood but by choice, by love, by the kind of loyalty that shows up when it matters most. This past year taught me that family is not about who shares your DNA, I said, raising a glass in toast. It is about who shows up. Who stays. Who sees your worth when you cannot see it yourself. It is about who helps you heal, not who causes the wounds. I looked at Sam, who had never once wavered in her support, who had loved me through my darkest moments and celebrated each small victory. To real family, I said, "The one we choose." They echoed the toast, glasses catching the last rays of sunset. Later, as the party continued inside, I stood alone on the deck, looking out at the darkening ocean. I thought about the journey from that hospital bed to this moment, about the parents who had walked away and the strangers who had stayed, about pain that destroys and pain that transforms. I had lost the family I was born into, but I had found something more precious, more real. I had found my own strength, my own worth, my own capacity for resilience. And I had found people who valued me not for what I could provide or what name I carried, but simply for who I was. The accident that had nearly killed me had ultimately given me life, a life more authentic and meaningful than anything I had known before. In losing everything, I had found what mattered most. What would you do if your family abandoned you at your lowest point? Have you ever experienced betrayal from those who should have protected you? How did you rebuild afterward? Leave a comment below, share your story, and if this resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to support the channel. Remember that sometimes the greatest freedom comes after the deepest pain. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength on your own journey, whatever form it may take.